Hello, hello, and welcome to the From Nature to Nurture podcast. I am your host, Danielle, and I am so excited to bring you the 6th episode of this podcast. It is also my first interview, which I am so excited to share with you because when I met this woman, I met her at the Mid-South Women's Herbal Conference in October of 2024, and as soon as I met her, I knew that if I ever had a podcast, I would want her to be on, which was really cool to kind of like think about while I was interviewing her. So today we are hearing from Mo Judith. Raised closely to the natural world, Maureen, or Mo Judith, was shaped by the quiet intelligence of plants, ecosystems, and wilderness. From an early age into adulthood, she became a lifelong student of nature, and she began to study herbalism in her teenage years. She left the country at 18 years old in pursuit of traveling to broaden her understanding of life and those who inhabited this earth. Drawn not only to local ecologies, but also the ways of life expressed across the globe, she spent around 5 years traveling and hitchhiking, seeking to learn from the earth and those who still spoke her language. Today she runs Aura Lavora, a project, laboratory, and brand dedicated to alchemical herbalism and right relationship with the earth. Their work scratches the surface of a new kind of research, one that bridges wisdom and the soul with modern science and chemistry. She donates 3% of all of her profits to foundations dedicated to reforestation and coral rejuvenation. Mo is an incredible woman, and I cannot wait to share this interview with you, so let's get started. Welcome, Mo. I am so excited to have you on the podcast today.
Thanks. Yeah, it's a pleasure to be here.
So, you have a very unique background and a different type of herbalism that most people don't know a lot about. So, I would love to hear about how you ended up on the plant path and where your work has taken you.
Yeah, long story, but yeah, I'll try to synopsis it. My journey to plants really started in childhood, as many people's roots start there. But I was raised across the street from a nature preserve, and it was really there where these plants and ecosystems and rivers really became my greatest friend and ally. And I knew intuitively from a really young age that these things were alive, and that had their own intelligence and sentience. And these gardens featured plants growing from all around the world. And that idea just really fascinated me, that life looked differently elsewhere. I know that sounds a little mundane and like, oh, well, obviously, but it just blew my mind. And that really pushed me to travel. And I spent about 5 years like vagabonding, hitchhiking, traveling through about 50 different countries, and really on the search of, it was the ecosystems and the mountains and places of nature that drew me to them. And I was in search of people who, still spoke the language of Earth, really, and to understand their thoughts and to share my own and really create collaboration there. And to just really learn. I've been so blessed to be truly invited into communities and taught from so many different people. Their beliefs and their lineages. And in Africa, where I first came across plant salts as a practice. They're quite popular in certain parts of Africa, where you take plants and you'll burn them down and extract out the salt, the mineral compounds of them, and utilize that as medicine. And it was in Madagascar where then I saw this practice come much further. Actually, I was very rural. I was hitchhiking on fishing boats down the coast, and in Africa, but in specifically Madagascar, it's a really superstitious country. And if you wear an ankle bracelet there, it's your stamp for being a witch doctor. So a lot of these people who were like actual witch doctors thought I was a witch doctor, but I was just this white girl from the United States that was wearing ankle bracelets, And but it was in this specific community where I really came across the art of spagyrics. But that was prior. It took about 7 years for me to actually figure out that word to put to it. And yeah, so it was very inspiring. But really, from a young age, I was always pushed to understand the natural world. I think I'm such a student to nature, and always will be.
That is so beautiful and so unique. Most people don't get to travel around the world and learn these indigenous medicines hands on, straight from the source. So, that is really a really cool experience. So, you were introduced to alchemy through plant salts. So, once you got back to the United States, how did your journey progress with this newfound passion?
Yeah, I mean the journey, it's a weaving, isn't it? It's never a linear story. But when I first got back to the United States, I truly went through culture shock in a lot of ways. I had just spent so many years traveling through truly some of the poorest countries, and in a really specific way. I wasn't traveling in this like really luxurious or fabulous way where I was in like Italy, for example. I was really in the dirt and camping for an extended period of time of my life, through such a developmental phase. And then kind of coming back to the United States and, seeing the experiencing imperialism in a new way, where I had stepped away from all of these things. And then I was really hurt, to be honest with you, and deeply affected, by what I'd seen. And, I went on to essentially just become an environmental activist, and went to many different pipeline protests, and was just trying to help in some ways, is like the way I would put to it. And when I got to, Standing Rock was this very big protest in 2017, that took place. And when I got there, I was kind of asked, like, oh, what can you do to help? And all I thought to really say was, well, I'm somewhat of an herbalist. And, it was like that phrase, it just like summoned 5 boxes of like herbs and a line of sick people out the door who had just been, absolutely battered with chemicals by our government, and really enduring quite extreme weather conditions. And I really never put it down since then. And along the way, I found the word, spagyric, and this process, and it just like light bulbs went off in my head of like, wow, I'd seen this in Africa, but not in this European lens. Now, usually spagyrics and alchemy in general is really spoken about in a European lens. And so it just blew my mind. I was like, wow, this spans cultures. And, the further and further you get down into the history and the movement of alchemy, you can really trace that, back. But
That leaves such a great opening to what I wanted to ask you. So, you used herbalist, spagyricist, alchemist, kind of all in that same uh, discussion. So, you already had a bit of plant knowledge before you started digging more into alchemy. So, I would love to hear how herbalism is similar to and differs from alchemy.
sure, yeah. I mean, I think the thing about herbalism in general is that it's an ancestral lineage. It connects us all. It truly doesn't matter what, country or culture you're from. There's herbal medicine there, and that's actually true with alchemy as well. Alchemy it's a living science. It's seeing everything as living, and the best herbalists, right? There's a difference between herbal medicine and the herbal marketplace, right? And so herbal medicine is more the intelligence of herbs and plants and how they affect you and how you affect them. It's a co-relationship. And the herbal marketplace, unfortunately, is where so many people actually first experience, quote unquote, herbal medicine. And it's more allopathic. It's oh, you have a bruise, like, oh, arnica is great for that, or like, oh, your liver's having issues, oh, dandelion root, as opposed to your connection to these things. And alchemy is solely about the connection. It's about your connection to everything, really, to the earth, to the cosmos, to each other, to the plants, to the animals, to psyche, to consciousness, really. So they're intertwined very, very deeply. Yeah, but alchemy, I should say, is really, there's kind of this interesting thing going on right now where people kind of hear the word alchemy at times and they'll think of spagyrics. But alchemy is actually not spagyrics solely, I should say. There's deep connection to them, but they're actually quite separate, separate paths.
Oh, it's so exciting. Okay, so I would love to hear a little bit about the history of alchemy and how it interweaves with animism.
Yeah, it's a fantastic question. It's a weaving of a story. It's not linear, and so what I'll say that in the history, yeah, alchemy is really just animism. Animism is this idea that all things have soul, right? And so in history of alchemy, you can find the word alchemy, it's related to Egypt. Chemia or chemet is the ancient word for Egypt. And it was in reference to the Nile flooding and creating fertility in the land. And so it really lived there for quite a long time. It kind of terrorized the surrounding nations. I mean, ancient Egypt was a huge nation at the time, and they would create alchemically made gold or gemstones, and they would trade these for armies and sink nations this way, and it was quite impressive, and that really concerned the Roman Empire, specifically. I think it was Diocletian, the emperor, who, he banned all alchemical texts and called for the burning of them. And so it wasn't safe to practice alchemy for a long time, it was an earth-based experience. Alchemy really, it's not something that's man-made. It came from the earth. We witnessed it, we experienced it, we observed it, we were given it. And so, when it became unsafe in these areas, it fled further east into more Arabic territories where these things could be practiced. And it became extremely refined over there, extremely, through different distillation techniques and through different philosophies. And you can see it went even further out east. It went all the way India, China, and circled back down, back over into Europe again. And through its slow trickling back into Europe, Europe was really in almost an identity crisis, is what I would say at the time. There was just so much going on, lots of war, lots of cultures clashing at the time, and lots of religion and state, religion and government becoming quite connected. And so animism, it's kind of started a slow death. We'll kind of weave over to animism now, but at the time, this idea that the earth is dead, it's like a 400-year-old idea. It's very, very new in the context of like humans even. And so, something fascinating about animism is that you're predisposed to its experience. Children of the ages, between 2 and 7 years old, they'll go through an animistic phase in life, and regardless of culture, regardless of country, right? And so what that says to me is that as humans, this is a part of your experience, but we diligently pluck that out. No, that's not alive. No, don't speak to a tree. That's quite primitive. No, that's savage to experience that field as alive. No, that river's not speaking to you. And so it's plucked out of us quite quickly. But the death of animism was very slow, long, complicated. We theorize that it came out of, where we started to sow seeds in our fields and wilderness was kept separate. And then slowly religious context, social context, political context, kind of came into the fold there. And it was really the 30-Year War, which was 1618 to 1648. Now, this actually had, a significant amount to do with alchemy, but, it started as a religious war. It was the Protestants, fighting the Catholics, and it's very complicated, but that war is what gave wake to the scientific revolution. It was absolutely devastating to most of Europe. About a third of the individuals in Europe passed away in it, and it gave way to philosophers like Galileo or Descartes or John Locke, who advocated that a thing's physicality is simply what it is. So color, emotion, and intuition are downright unreliable, and that only humans had access to consciousness or a way to God. But you cannot measure consciousness and how far it spans. And so this is where science kind of falls flat. But we've kind of built this world up so it makes sense for us. And I think that again, that idea comes from a place of deep trauma, and it's no wonder to me that we, 400 years into this kind of belief that we're having catastrophic environmental events go on around the world. We're divorced from the anima mundi. The anima mundi, anima meaning soul, mundi meaning of the world, right? So the soul of the world. We're divorced from it. We've separated ourselves from it, and so we have no connecting force. And so it's just no wonder that we have such separation and pretty large issues between cultures, societies, and ecological disasters as well. And so, in alchemy, all things are alive, right? All things being, the living realms between the metallic, mineral, plant, and animal realms, and how they all feed into each other, So metals give way to minerals, minerals give way to plants, plants give way to animals. You can see this just on a food scale, even. And so the defining difference between chemistry and alchemy is that chemistry views what it works with as dead matter, while alchemy views what it works with as conscious. So therefore, it can evolve as conscious. And so, alchemists at the time, they were really trying to understand, okay, well, how did consciousness create matter? After the scientific revolution and everything became, its physicality is its defining force. The question then became, well, how did matter create consciousness?
So true. So sadly true.
Yeah.
I would love to hear about the Gaia theory and then how that is mirrored within ourselves.
So Gaia theory, it's quite incredible. In 1965, James Lovelock, kind of posited, the Earth is, maintaining stable temperature, and he started to question and become inquisitive as to why. And in 1970 it really released, but it essentially says that oceans, rocks, plants, atmosphere, systems, they all interact in complex and intelligent ways to self-regulate the biophysical conditions of Earth. And it invites us to stop thinking in binaries, essentially, alive versus dead, man versus woman, nature versus human, spirit versus matter, and to begin to see these as continuous and interdependent. And really what he identified was that even though the sun is getting, brighter and hotter, we've maintained stable conditions, and relatively so. And why is that? And he really came to, with the works of Lynn Margulis, that it was life maintaining these conditions. Life isn't adapting to a static, dead environment. It's creating its environment, and specifically those of microbes, and how microbes, this exists in plants and animals, but it was in microbes long before. But the idea of photosynthesis, for example, taking carbon and turning that out into oxygen, or the nitrogen cycle, or the water cycle, the sulfur cycle, the phosphorus cycle. I mean, these things are just absolutely alchemical. and just glorious. I find them incredibly inspiring. And if you can take these cycles and you can put them to alchemical theory, which, Dr. Stephen Harding, who passed away last year in 2024, he really identified this. He really identified this. But over so life is interacting and controls the attributes of Earth, right, on a global scale. And now that really resonates, right, with the ancient wording of, all is one. It truly is. And we're inclusion to that. We are inclusive to that. You see the earth will, will have stress responses. It will control temperature. We do the same thing. We are just a part of the earth, truly. Everything that we do, we've learned from her, truly, and the microbes as well. It's life is stacked on top of life, which is also incredible. You sterilize a surface, life comes back almost immediately. The deepest we've dug into the earth, we have found life. We have found microbes. There are probably about 10,000 or more species living on your body, even alone. You almost have as much of something else living on and inside of you than you do human DNA. And so it really is just it's endosymbiosis, to be honest with you. This is this idea of one thing living inside of another, for example, whether that's psyche inside of human inside of Gaia. You can see it repeated over time and time again.
It's so beautiful. I know one of the biggest things that's impacted my overall mental, physical, spiritual health is working with like the nature cycles and kind of mirroring my life and schedule around what's happening out in nature. So, taking that slow winter to kind of like root down, having the moving with the vitality of summer to
Yeah.
kind of mirror that same energy pattern. And it's been really cool to kind of feel the natural rhythms in my body. The longer that I do it, I kind of naturally start to align where I'm not cognitively being like, oh, it's springtime, time to start revving up the energy, and it's time to plant, the seeds of my life. Uh, but it's something that starts to naturally happen as you start kind of working with these earth cycles and earth energies more over time.
Yeah. There's an idea in alchemy that secret fire, it's essentially an animating force to all things. And, around springtime, it starts to just become in the air because it's found in abundance and dew. And it affects all things. You can see it. You take garlic and you put it in your cabinet and you close the door, you open it, one day it's growing. It tends to be around that time, and not everything is affected by this, and you are as well. And it's really interesting. We've just separated ourselves very diligently, very consistently, over the past several hundred years, that now we see ourselves separate from nature. Again, we're divorced from this anima mundi. We're divorced from our own souls, even. On the names of economic vitality, and really we're doing us an injustice. And yeah.
So I would love for you to share a time when alchemy has helped you navigate like a personal change or personal initiation, something where it alchemized, haha, something in your life.
Yeah, I'm not really utilizing it. I mean, I'm conscious of it, but I'm subject to it. You can try to consciously embed this into your life, but naturally you are attuned to it. And I'll explain this in the seven operations and in a psyche sense and an earth sense. You're subject to it. It doesn't matter if you agree or not. This is happening to you at all times. And so these seven operations are, calcination, dissolution, separation, conjunction, fermentation, distillation, and coagulation. So Jungian psychology, for example, it's all from alchemy. Carl Jung was a very large advocate for the alchemical cycles, and So, we could see calcination. This is this idea of burning material down, burning your ego away. It's also where we can see the earth forming, about 4,600 million years ago. This earth was was becoming a molten planet, you could see this, in a psyche sense of, something happens to you, let's say that it affects your ego, it bruises it, you get this sense of anger, it just naturally comes about. And disillusion would come next. So this is where you dissolve something into water. And so we could see this on earth of our seas forming, our oceans coming to play. This is about 4,000 million years ago where this took place, relatively. And we could see this as, you take this experience, and let's say you go to your bathtub, you give a moment to it, you've just got to sit in it for a second, and slowly through that you experience separation, right? And so this is where, when our oceans formed, the rock in which it started to dissolve into these oceans, right? And so this chemical broth, started to form, and separation took place when, amino acids, nucleotides, these things would become proteins and DNA, and these fats, they would spontaneously separate into their own beings. And so, example, like you're in your bathtub, and this experience, you've thought about it, and you've separated out, my experience, their experience, the reality of experience, and you can identify the parts of yourself, the parts of your thoughts, the parts of your emotions that are all affecting and becoming this one thing. I mean, you can see them more clearly, right? And so next you can see conjunction happens. And this is really where cells formed. This is like opposites came together. A good example of this is, predatory bacteria. It was engulfing oxygen breathing bacteria, for an extended period of time. And then, a deal was struck. You could live inside of me, oxygen breathing bacteria. I'll give you a place to live, and you'll provide me energy. I'll provide you food. And this became the mitochondria. These became cells, right? This is endosymbiosis. This is Lynn Margulis's work. And so, in this conjunction, right, you're in your bathtub, you get this aha moment, right? Yes, I get it now. Like, this is what I actually think. This is what I actually feel about this situation. I've identified it. Great. But you're not done, right? Because next you have fermentation, right? And so fermentation, this is not just, it's not just decay, it's transformation. It's changing something else. This is the starting of the turning of the nitrogen cycle, of the carbon cycle. It's fermenting these things until they become something new, right? And so in this psyche sense, if you are fermenting this experience, right, it's like you might just need to give it a moment, right? So it's like you get out of your bathtub, you figured it out, so you leave your bathtub now, and maybe you eat something, your body is naturally doing that. You are naturally doing that. It happens all the time in nature, like literal fermentation. Next we have distillation, right? Distillation is, let's say, in a psyche sense, you go to sleep, you distill these things, you bring it out into the atmosphere, and you bring it back into yourself. This is the water cycle. We can see these things. It's refining your experience. Then you wake up, for example, the next day. This is coagulation. When this experience isn't separate from you, it's just a part of you. You've coagulated with your environment, right? This is, rainforests, coral reefs. These symbiotic networks are essentially functioning as a single being. And so in the psyche sense, when you've woken up, you've coagulated with the experience that happened to you yesterday. It's no longer affecting you the same way, because it's a part of you. And so you can go around and around the cycle as many times as you want, and as many times as you will. You can see these theories represented in mandalas, even coming out of India, and yeah, as I've said, Jungian psychology. So
That's so beautiful. I love how, as you're describing the seven processes, is that the word?
yeah, operations.
Oh yeah, okay,
science.
yeah. Yeah, as you're describing all of them, you gave us multiple layers of examples. That was really cool.
Yeah. Well, something to name about that as well is that, alchemy is not, it's not a man-made experience. This was witnessed. And really these operations, we received them. We received them from Gaia through either witnessing storms or meditation, if you'll have it, going into the unconsciousness, our unconsciousness, which I believe is just the consciousness of Gaia. We live inside of it. Again, endosymbiosis.
Oh, that's beautiful. So, are there any particular plants or elements that you feel deeply connected to or that you have worked with intimately through spagyrics or alchemical processes that you would like to speak about?
The thing that inspires me the most is the resilience and intelligence of plants. And to, as yeah, just as much as humanly possible, just honestly stand on the soapbox that I'm on right now to advocate for us to see that before we see profit, to see the plant before we see the tincture, to really create and have relationship before we create and have a bank account, with these processes, which is, unfortunately, and it really does need to be spoken about for more people, but this is the way herbal medicine goes at this moment, because this is the way that our societies go. Um, I think in terms of plants that really inspire me, I think I have a little love affair with different seaweeds and algae. I'm quite interested in them. I think that phytoplankton as well. Phytoplankton fascinate me. They release diethyl sulfide, right? And so this is a gas. It's oxidized in the air. It forms sulfuric acid, and this essentially creates cloud condensation nuclei, right? So it creates the clouds. It creates these small particles in which water vapor then condenses around and forms cloud droplets. And so it's more about the relationship for me. To have a healthy atmosphere, you need to have a healthy sea. These complete opposite things are actually in deep, deep relationship with one another. And I hope that everyone who considers themselves on the plant path and is interested in alchemy as well is advocating for just the same and doing the inner work to be there as well.
Absolutely. There is such a huge connection between plant consciousness and our environmental health and our own health. It's just like this beautiful triple axis of connection. How does plant communication work in with alchemy?
Well, plant communication, as far as I understand it, it's happening a lot of the time through the volatile compounds of the plant, so the essential oils of this plant, and um, and so those are really identified as the soul of a plant, right? And so you can kind of split up in the living worlds, right, which are metals, minerals, plants, and animals. They all have three things that biodynamically make them what they are, which is the soul, the spirit, and the body, the salt. And so communication is happening between VOCs within plants. It's how they talk to one another, to different species, even, and that's in the soul of the plant, the essential oil, if you will.
You're talking about like truly getting to know the plant
Mm-hmm.
deeply before working on like a business, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I know like me personally, I do like I talk to the plants and I listen and I do meditations. And so I wasn't sure if there was something within alchemy that they have a similar process of getting to know the plants, maybe on a little more of like an esoteric type level, um, to deepen that practice and that inner knowing.
I think that's beautiful that you do that, honestly. I think that more people should be doing that. Humans have this great ability of reflective consciousness. I can come to you and I can say, Danielle, I see this about you. You could come to me, say, Mo, I see this about you. And you could go to a tree and you could describe to this tree, you're going through a process of photosynthesis. And you can describe what it is doing to help it understand itself better. And, that might sound quite crazy, but I truly do think that we are, while we're on our own soul journey here in Gaia, so is she. She is also trying to understand who she is better. And I think that we're just simply a part of that experience. We're participants in Earth, essentially. And so in alchemical framework, there's an understanding of resonance, essentially. So resonance is this idea of something over here is affecting something over there, for a really short synopsis of what this is. But so the thing about alchemy, and in this relationship with plants, is that it's the relationship that's highlighted. It's your relationship with everything that's highlighted. It's this idea that when you're in the lab, and let's say that you're working on spagyrics, you're working on yourself as well. These things are interacting within the middle, and affecting both, in a positive, negative, neutrality sort of a way, just depending. And so you do interact with these plants, and you can measure this scientifically as well. Humans having a positive charge and plants having a negative charge, and if you sit down to these plants, then there's a neutrality hit right there. So you can measure these things, but in the framework of alchemy, everything is about relationship. It's about animism. These things are alive. You are alive, right? And so it wouldn't be a question, right? If I was in the same room with someone, and of course I'm affecting them. They can feel me empathetically. I can feel them. It's the same with plants.
I love that. Okay, so it sounds like it's less intentional, more natural.
Yeah, I would just say that it's a bit factual, and I'm not necessarily one calling for specifically facts. I think we need to call for wisdom at this time of day and age in which we're in, more than anything. But these processes are happening with or without you. So really, it's just an invitation to you. Well, how do you want to be a part of it then? Because you actually have no choice. You're here on planet Earth. So am I. So is that oak tree. So are you. And so, how are you separate? How are you different? I'd love to hear that explanation. Of course, humans are a bit odd and different, obviously, we can acknowledge that. But to say that you're separate from nature, again, I think that that's an idea born from trauma, born from, control or mastery. The idea that you could, at least, the idea that humans even think that they could understand all parts of the universe. It's silly to me. We're creating these systems in a way that we can understand, so that way we can then present it. But and so it's quite scary to embrace that. Oh well, we just don't know. But we don't truly.
Yeah, it's kind of just giving in to the unknown and just being comfortable with not having all the answers.
Yeah, and being a participant with it. I would say, being a participant of these things. You are a participant of Gaia. You are a participant of nature. Same as you're a participant of your society. Um, yeah.
Beautiful. So, what is one simple alchemical idea or practice that someone can start exploring today who is really lit up by what you're talking about? What's one simple little act that they can do?
So I think, like in your everyday practice, if you're wanting to connect or feel connected, find the ways to be a part of it and to align your life with these things, whether that's composting or recycling, or making a conscious effort to learning, or even just going down into a nature place without your phone and sitting there and letting the experience unfold as it will without trying to control it. But really, I want to call for the fact that the universe is in a constant state of recycling. It's in a constant state of recycling. And I think that something that would help people feel a part of this is to face the things that are affecting us today. I think the carbon cycle, for example, if we could just talk about ocean acidification, this is, CO2, carbon exists in the atmosphere in two forms, right? Carbon dioxide and methane. And our oceans essentially will absorb large amounts of carbon. And then when they do, it becomes carbonic acid. It changes again to bicarbonate. It changes once again to carbonate. That carbonate then interacts with calcium, becoming calcium carbonate. Now, this is where all shells, reef systems, limestone, like all of this is coming from this, right? It's turning into a fixed substance. And, our ocean life heavily depends on a certain pH balance of the seas to thrive. And pre industrial eras, the ocean acidity was around 8.25. Now it's around 8.14. And so this doesn't sound like a big jump, right? 1.1, but what you have to understand that this is the time scale. This is a time scale of what is happening. And we are producing more carbon into the atmosphere more than ever before. And what's essentially happening is that our oceans are becoming more acidic. Scientists theorize that by 2100, coral reef systems, shells, they'll simply dissolve because they cannot exist in this acidity. And so I think if someone wants to feel a part of this, then you've got to embrace the whole situation, right? The way that Gaia does. I think that's something a part of this is that there's so much carbon into the atmosphere, right? And so Gaia knows this. Gaia truly knows this, and will create hurricanes, for example. We'll pull up sediment from the bottom of the ocean, and we'll pull phytoplankton to the top. You can see massive blooms of these phytoplankton after a really big storm. And what they're doing and why Gaia has pulled them into the atmosphere, into the surface, is because they fix carbon. They're doing this in the carbon cycle. So she's desperately trying to pull the carbon out of the carbon cycle. So I think that if you want to be a part of alchemy, I'm always going to advocate that you be a part of your earth then and decentralize yourself. Decentralization, that's quite a big topic, isn't it? Because as humans, we've kind of identified ourselves as the center of everything, the epicenter of, we've created societies, cities, buildings, frameworks for mentality all around the human experience. But to really embrace and experience that you're actually not the only one here. In nature, these animals, these plants, they have rights just the same. And so if you want to be a part of it, then I ask you to embrace it then.
Perfect. Beautiful. Go fight for your earth.
Yeah, truly though, actually, I think that it's quite a fad, but and depressing. It is. But if you really want to have an effect, you've got to heal where we are, where our psyche is as humans. And to do that, that takes legitimate work. That's not easy. And if you're doing it, I truly commend you. I'm inspired by you.
Yeah, I know something that I've worked on for a long time just within herbalism is to not talk about using plants, but working with plants.
Hmm.
It's very subtle difference, but it's a big mindset shift of you are not just extracting and taking from the earth, you are working alongside with those similar processes, and you're taking that time to respect the plants and the life that they're giving for you to be able to make this medicine. And just that one little mindset shift will trickle into the rest of your life as you start like looking around and start decentralizing yourself essentially.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that there's so much like indigenous wisdom around this, for example. There's a and more than that, I think that it's a human right to experience the world like this. But if you go into the fields and let's say that you're gathering honeysuckle, for example, you gather quite a lot of it, and maybe your practices aren't necessarily ethical, or maybe you just haven't been taught. You don't know because you've been taught that you deserve and that you're allowed to take these things and that it is for you. But to shift that mindset, then there's kind of a question of, oh, this is a conscious being. This is alive. Well, we've probably got to ask permission, don't we? Probably do. And so there's this connection that's formed, because then if you're taking from this plant, you're also taking from the psyche of the plant. That psyche is deeply connected to the psyche of our world, the anima mundi. So once again, here we are back again. We're taking from the soul. And so to draw this connection is just so, so important.
It's all so intricately connected.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, if someone wants to learn more about alchemy, go deeper and study, learn about spagyrics, learn about all the different alchemical processes, do you have any recommended texts, teachers, or resources?
Yeah, I'll start out by saying that there are a lot of different branches within alchemy, and even just within spagyrics. And so your teacher, your teacher matters, depending on the route that you're taking or the lens that you're trying to see it in. I think that for me, I'm a very big advocate for ecological alchemy. I think alchemy is ecology. I think that there are I think if you're interested in that lens, I highly recommend that you read Lynn Margulis, Dorian Sagan, Dr. Stephen Harding. Um, I hope that you read about the Gaia theory, from James Lovelock. And I think if you're interested in operative alchemy, Robert Allen Bartlett is really quite a master in that. He's out in Washington. He's a teacher of mine, and there's so many different paths that you can take within the alchemical framework. And so really I just encourage you to start looking, and to start approaching it to see which path you want to take. If you are interested in things that I'm saying, I teach classes every year. Close to your neck of the woods, Danielle, I'm teaching a class with Leah Larabelle from High Garden Tea out in Chattanooga in October. That'll be a 2-day intensive. And then I teach, a couple different lectures throughout the year. And yeah, but I encourage you to read about it, but not just to read about it, but to critically think about it, to ask questions about it, because something you've got to understand is that all of these texts, from 16th century or even today, everything that you think, even, you've been highly influenced on what is around you. And so you've got to critically think about what those things are, and not take things at face value. I'm a huge advocate for that. Science is a huge advocate for that. And so really it's about you and your journey in it.
Wonderful. Well, my head and heart are super full. And I just want to say that hearing all your words gives me actually a lot of hope that more people start thinking outside of themselves like you do and think about the bigger picture and the earth and to be more in right relationship with everything around us. So I'm so happy that you were able to come on and speak today. As we go to wrap up, I would love to hear about where my listeners can find you, what you're currently offering, and any other additional information you would like to leave about you and your business.
Yeah. Yeah. In general, right now I'm moving into a laboratory space where, the intent is to conduct research on, alchemical philosophy within the frameworks of spagyrics and the spagyric process, within plants and minerals and metals within those realms. And so if you're interested in staying up to date on those things, I'm not amazing at social media. I'm getting quite better at it. I think I log on every day now, at least once. So, um, my business is called Ora Lavora, and that was actually taken from Ora At Labora. Ora At Labora. It means work in prayer. It's a Latin phrase, and it's this idea. I've taken it as this idea that if your work is aligned with your prayer, then authenticity comes, and with that authenticity, then there's connection, there's truth, and so I've just kind of changed the phrase a little bit, but that's where it's come from, and you know I'm I teach in the summer into fall, and yeah, we'll be doing that more and more. I've got a website, auralavora.com, and right now it's just representing the products that are produced in this process. You know, these spagyric tinctures. But soon that will have free education resources. I'm hoping to roll those out by November.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Mo. So there you have it. That was my conversation with Mo. I absolutely just, her words just speak straight to my heart, and I get really lit up whenever I hear about her talking about right relationship with the land and alchemical processes. And I mean, you heard her mass amounts of wisdom in the podcast. So I invite you all to check her out, follow her social medias, go check out her website. Like she said, that she has classes coming up and free resources coming to her website this fall. So I want to end this podcast with a reading. This is from one of her articles called Gaia Alchemy, and this is just the end of it. But the first time that I read it, I just sobbed and sobbed and sobbed because it's just so beautiful, and I feel it so strongly as well. So here we go. When we begin to perceive all things as alive, as ensouled, our actions shift. We do not extract, we commune. We do not conquer, we collaborate. We do not dominate, we devote. Animism is not a belief. It is a way of being in right relationship. It is the orientation of the heart towards the sacred. If Gaia is the great alchemist, then we are her apprentices. We are not the center of the story, but a part of it, a vital, intricate, and evolving part. Our role is not to control, but to participate with awareness and intention. Our medicine is not perfection, but presence. So I invite you now to consider how you might relate differently, how you might enter into conversation with the wind, the stone, the mycelium, the moon. What would it mean to listen with your whole body, to dream with the land, to ask permission, to give thanks? I invite you to touch the soil with reverence, to drink water as though it were holy, to speak aloud to the trees and believe that they hear you and tell them of their photosynthesis. I invite you to remember that your body is made of stars, minerals, rivers, and ancestors. You are not separate from this world. You are a cell in the body of Gaia. You are the earth dreaming of itself. And finally, I invite you to dream, to imagine a world in which all life is honored, where science is married to spirit, where governance centers care, where economy follows ecology, where wisdom comes not from algorithms, but from the quiet intelligence of the moss, tide, and stone. This is not fantasy. It is memory. It is future. It is the alchemy of Gaia unfolding in you. If you would like to learn more about my offerings, you can find them at rootandwandercollective.com, and I'll see you along the plant path.